Imagine when you are in uni or college or school, and someone comes and approaches you and say, hey, you know, do you really believe this stuff that is written in your Bible? That your God is so powerful, he made the whole world in a few days. There are stories about the sun stopping, and there is one day missing in creation. Do you feel comfortable when people challenge you about the Bible? It's an ancient book. It cannot be accurate. How do you feel about that? Are you able to come back at them? And do you feel, you know, no, I'm comfortable and I'm confident?
I just say to them, like, don't take it literally, otherwise.
Don't take it literally.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree with that? Do you feel comfortable? Your friends, do you feel comfortable talking about your Christianity? You know, people now stand up and say, hey, you know, we are Muslims. Islam is a good religion. We should be respected, our human rights. Some people stand up and say, hey, I'm gay. I'm entitled to be gay. It's my human right. And you see, in our society now, there are two big sort of collect styles. There is the communist style in China and in Russia, where an individual fits in a big clump of people to achieve the wishes and aspirations of a society. The Chinese people now are invading the world. They all know that they fit in as cogs in a big, big wheel. And they are prospering. On the other hand, you have got the Western society, which we all become part of. It talks about individuality. It's about me. I am important. I have to be happy. I have to be successful. I am. And it has replaced the I am, God, I am. I am now. It's all about me. This is why I'm afraid to say that even in our personal lives, even in marriages, what's in it for me? And this is why people now end up having lots of divorces and things. What's in it for me? What am I getting out of this relationship? What am I getting out of this job? It's about me. And both views don't fit in with what Jesus did and what Christianity is about. So we feel now cornered when we talk about Christianity. And everyone is attacking Christianity. The BBC will be very careful if they talk about something against Islam. But if it comes about Christianity, yeah, you can say whatever you like. And it usually gets accepted. So anyway, I have been asked to talk about apologetics. I don't read quite a lot about that, and I'll explain in a minute. But I thought for your sake to talk about, can you reconcile Jesus and science? I intentionally didn't talk about Christianity and science. Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is a life. And this is why I believe it's all about Jesus, not about I am Christian. It's a religion. So evolution theory. You can't talk about everything in one go. So I'll choose one topic, evolution. Do you believe that your grandparents were monkeys, basically? Our ancient grandparents were monkeys, if you believe in evolution, and we evolved from them. Do you believe in that or not? Because that's the way it is now. Can you show me? Do you believe in evolution? Yeah? Maybe?
Depends what you mean by that.
Depends which bit of evolution.
Darwin's evolution. Do you believe in it or not?
Macro or micro?
That's Darwin's evolution theory. For those of you who don't, or to refresh your memory. It said that all life on Earth started billions of years ago from a common ancestor. All of us started from an ancestor, whatever that ancestor was. And gradually, through mutations, natural selection, species arrived and species went into extinction, and eventually we have got the world that we live in now. And that's so-called macroevolution. Do we believe in that? And that's, if you like, the way it works. You have got here the origin of life, some sort of simple organism, and gradually that kept through hundreds of millions of years, dividing, changing, some organisms dying and not prospering, and some other organisms, for some reason, becoming more successful and gradually evolving until we became us. Do you believe in that sort of thing? That's a very popular theory now. Darwin's impact is enormous. However you agree with him or disagree with him, this is some of the stuff that was said about him. And that's not by me, that's by Time magazine, by top places. The decline in religious belief in the 20th and 21st century is mainly attributed to the theory of evolution than anything else. Because once you believe in that, you don't need a creator. It basically said that creation was, or life was an autopilot. It's driving itself. You don't need a creator to have that. And someone said that Darwin broke man's link with God. You don't need God. Now, this is not religion against science. It's science against science. Religion is not against, and Christianity is not against brain. God doesn't want us to become robots who don't use our brain and to just be like zombies. We want to be scientific, we want to talk about that. So I'm going to touch very briefly on some scientific facts. So I apologize for being extra boring, more than usual, for the next few slides. We believe in evolution to an extent. And I like what Sam said about micro and macroevolution. You know now that you've got cows that you can breed mainly for milk production rather than having good meat. And some cows are bred to have lovely meat and so on. Even ourselves, I didn't realize this. When we came here to the country years ago, we were so accustomed to the weather in Egypt. And we came here, it was winter. And I remember it was frighteningly cold. We were wearing layers and layers of things. Now we don't. Our bodies started acclimatizing. So this is microevolution. The most serious form of microevolution that we all suffer with, or we may suffer with, is antibiotic resistance. You know, microorganisms. Now you hit them with an antibiotic, they get used to it. It doesn't hit me anymore. So the pharmacists develop another more clever antibiotic, and they keep developing and evolving that they have resistance. The frightening thing is that there is a group of organisms that are now resistant to all the antibiotics we have. That's serious stuff. There are few people, even in the UK, who died recently because there isn't a cure for them. And these are hushed news because they will be frightening to know. But there are those organisms now, and they are getting more and more. So this is a form of microevolution, and we do not disagree with that. But as for macroevolution, let's think a little bit about it. There are two concepts that we'll challenge with macroevolution, Darwin's macroevolution. In order for you to evolve from one species to a more evolved and more specialized species, what do you have to go through? You're doing it very well. You are asleep with your eyes open. It's very, very, very good. You have to go through transitions. You can't start like, I don't know, a bird and become a monkey just like that. You have to have if you think about it, you have to have an animal that is a hybrid between the two. So you evolve from this to that over hundreds of millions of years. So theoretically, if you believe in evolution, you should have examples of these hybrids, these transitional animals. You have to. You cannot evolve from something. You can't evolve from a monkey to a human without having something in between. Yeah? So Darwin himself conceded when he put his theory forward, he said, look, I admit, in my day now, there aren't so many of those. There aren't so many fossil evidence that there are in-betweeners, if you like. There aren't so many of those, but he was so confident that he predicted that future discoveries will come up with those guys, with those transitional in-betweeners. However, this is a quote from the curator of the Field Museum in Chicago, and he said, now it's 120 when he mentioned that quote. More than 120 years, with 250,000 fossils available, we have fewer examples of those transitional species than we had beforehand, because they started classifying animals properly and so on. Now we haven't discovered many of those. In fact, all the fossil evidence, the real fossil evidence that we have, confirmed that when an animal phylum or group appeared, it appeared fully formed and it appeared fully functional without anything in between. So it's against the theory. Whenever an animal is there, it's there. And the fossil evidence for them is as good as they are now. They are not getting more modified. They don't have a luxury model coming out after the basic model that came hundreds of millions years ago. It comes, it's full, it's functional, and that's that. Can you see that? It's a theory, and you are responding to the theory with facts. Now, another point. We've talked about transitional species. Another point is that, by definition, you evolved from one ancestor to become all these birds and insects and animals and so on. So started from something simple into evolving complexity until we reach ourselves as an evolved animal. Yeah? So what are you talking about here? You're talking about something gradually getting more and more and more complex. But someone said, well, hang on, with the knowledge we have now about single organisms, let's say an amoeba. Can you imagine how complex is an amoeba? Sorry? How complex is an amoeba? How complex is one cell, one of our cells? Any animal, take any animal, one cell. What is it to be alive? What do you need to do to be alive? Even that cell has to be alive, isn't it? What do you need for that?
Energy.
Energy. Chromosomes. You need to do few things. You need to assimilate something, whatever that is, to allow you to have energy, to create energy, and use this energy and to function. You need to have a code so that you can reproduce, so this cell becomes two, etc., and reproduce itself. And when you start to think of this mechanism, you're talking about the genes, you're talking about the DNA, you're talking about the RNA, and the RNA translates into proteins. That's not very simple, is it? So even the simplest organism is more complex than what Darwin said and Darwin thought of hundreds of years ago. It's not that simple. That's not simple. If you look at the basic, that's exactly the same picture like before, but in a different. This, any of those basic animals or cells even, here at the bottom of the scale, before they reach that complex and evolved stage like ourselves, before they acquire speech, before they acquire the ability to reproduce, etc., even that is not simple. It was simply thought to be simple in the days of Darwin because they didn't have enough. They didn't have electron microscopy. They didn't have all the knowledge that we know now about one single cell. Life was not simple. So evolution means evolving complexity, and when people started looking at molecular biology, they started to say, come on, that was not simple. So the evolution theory doesn't make sense, at least at those 2 points. But let's step back even a step further. We are not trying to debate with Darwin here, but we have come up with 2 conceptual points that challenge Darwin. But what is even more serious is, how did life begin in the first place? How did life begin in the first place? Darwin assumes that there was an organism that was, if you like, our grandparent, whatever it was, and we kept evolving and evolving from that grandparent until we became monkeys and cockroaches and animals and birds. Everyone started from this common ancestor zillions of years ago, if that's the right word. But how did life begin with this ancestor? Now, I'm sorry it gets more boring, so stick with me. One of the theories is something called random chance. Random chance means chemicals were laying around, and then, given the right time, they had millions and billions of years, they started reacting together at random, and then a living material came. That's that theory. It's a very popular theory. Darwin said that in 1871, and then some Russian chap, very clever biochemist, said something similar to that, that complex molecular arrangements and functions of living matter can evolve from simple chemical compounds if you give them enough time and given right conditions. And there was an experiment, again, I promised you I'd be boring, and I'm dead boring, so stick with me. Miller, a chap called Miller came up with an ingenious experiment that may give him a claim. He came up with 3 molecules or 3 gases: ammonia, methane, and hydrogen. Probably all of them smell nasty apart from hydrogen. And he put them together in a compartment, and he said in the olden days, this was the atmosphere. It included those 3 gases: ammonia, methane, and hydrogen. Are you guys following me?
Yep.
Yeah? Fine. Then he started shooting electricity at them, assuming that in the olden days, guys, can you talk but keep it quiet? It's, come on. So he started sending electric waves, if you like, through them to simulate lightning, assuming that in the olden days, the earth was full of those gases, and he started shooting electricity, and behold, amino acids were formed. And everyone said, that's a beautiful example. Amino acids were formed, amino acids are the basis of proteins, starts a human life, or starts of life. And this became the most significant experiment to support that theory and support Darwin. However, Miller didn't have knowledge, and it was not right that those gases were there: ammonia, methane, and hydrogen. In fact, the National American Space Program were looking at planets and what is the origin of Earth and so on. They said they have never had those gases. Most of what the Earth had was water, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. They have never had significant amounts of ammonia, methane, and hydrogen. And you see, all the clever guys who come up with clever theories, these theories are based on what we call a postulation. You postulate something. It's an assumption. If the assumption is wrong, the whole thing is wrong. But by the time you gather momentum, it's difficult to stand back and say, hey, where did you come up with that? But you need to realize, when you listen to something, you know, where did this come from? We need to be inquisitive and reflective. That's one thing. The second thing is, you all heard of the Big Bang. The discovery of the background radiation in 1965 led to this theory that one day, at one point in creation, this Big Bang happened. And this theory invalidates this random reaction. Because Big Bang, by definition, was much, much more powerful than the atomic bomb. It's the Big Bang, the big reaction that created the whole world. By definition, Earth should have been, or the whole, if it wasn't only Earth, the whole cosmos should have been extremely hot as a result of this reaction. You know, when the atomic bomb came on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it created like Creator. No, it was like surrounded in the areas around it. The center of the atom of the where the bomb went, for miles around that, because of the high temperature, everything melted. It creates huge temperature. Imagine the Big Bang. It created even higher temperature. So by definition, if you believe in the Big Bang, Earth wouldn't be as old as we think it is. It's not billions of years now, because it would have taken Earth billions of years for the temperature to come down and down and down to allow proper reactions to happen and for animals to occur. Everyone would have melted if they were living in this temperature. So only we have about 500 million years from the beginning to the start formation of life. And 500 millions of years aren't enough to make life. I'm sorry to be boring, but can you see where I'm coming from? So theories are against theories. Now, another theory against it, and that you may find that is probably the most interesting one. Statistics of this happening. They said that the statistics of a chance making of just one protein, I'm not talking about a whole cell, one protein to make it from simple reaction is 10 to the power of 60, i.e. 1 in 10 to the power of 60, 10 with 60 zeros attached to it. That's infinitely impossible. To give it a flavor, you blindfold someone and you take them to North Africa, you know, the largest desert in the world, the Sahara Africa, yeah? And you blindfold them and you ask them to find one particular speck of sand in the Sahara Desert between Egypt and Algeria and just one particular speck of sand, and he gets it right, not once, but he does it 3 times. Can you expect this to happen? But that's the statistic. Another way of doing it is someone suggested beforehand a tornado hitting a junkyard and making a fully functional 747. And in order for me to put this in context, I Googled and I tried to find how many parts would a 747, Boeing 747 have. It has 6 million parts. And it has miles of cables inside it and so on. So imagine a tornado whirling through the junkyard, making a fully functional, properly working 747. If you believe in that, then you believe in evolution. Another theory of life is what we call chemical affinity. Someone clever in biochemistry said all the molecules, all the proteins that we have must have happened because amino acids link to each other by chemical affinity. So in order for you to have this particular protein, it must have happened simply based on chemical affinity. And these amino acids, just based on the chemical affinity, started joining each other by this affinity, and they made up proteins which made up life. The best way to answer that is, again, scientifically. They made a computer program that looks at it can analyze each protein and look at the way the amino acids, the component amino acids work, and see if they have affinity to each other or not. And they proved that all the proteins they looked at, the structure of the proteins don't have anything to do with chemical affinity. So that theory is wrong, to the extent that this chap called Hanna, who was the guy, one of the most famous guys who developed that theory initially, reached the stage when he put his hands up and said, no, it doesn't work. It's not working. That's one of the originators of it. It's like Darwin coming back and saying, no, it's not right. So, another theory. Do you need more science? Just to give you the names, these are other theories about the origin of life, something called self-ordering tendencies, seeding from space, vents in the ocean, life from clay. I have got stuff to talk about them if you want me, but I thought by now you are really...
I like movie titles.
Exactly. Exactly. But there are theories and pros and cons. But I'll just tell you something here. I'll stop that. One of my good colleagues and friends is a professor of biochemistry, and he told me he's a religious man. He's Christian. And he said, you see, I think people come up with that stuff because they want to convince themselves that there isn't God. Because if there is God, they will have to abide by his rules. It's very easy for us to say there isn't God and try to go out of our way to prove there isn't God, because if there is God, automatically we know we have to, listen to his code somehow. And people don't want to do that. And he said, as for the fact that they say the DNA of one of the earliest cells is similar to parts of the DNA of our body, he said, that's simple. I can easily explain it. If I make something, if I make a car, and I know that this component works, when I make my higher model, I will use the same part. Why would I make up something? If the basic model is working, I will keep using it in my other cars. He said, but people are going out of their way to prove there isn't God, just simply to make themselves God. And this goes back to the point I was saying. Our society does not want a God, because then I can become God, and it's all about me. It's not about him. Yeah? That's the whole problem. I'll shift now to something else. Again, along the same lines. When I told you about the Bible, and you answered more or less what many of us say, no, don't take it literally. The Bible cannot be accurate literally. It cannot be. So it must be symbolic, it must be taken with a pinch of salt, etc. So if I tell you, in Joshua's days, they said that he prayed and God prolonged one day. So there is effectively one missing day in creation. Would you believe in that? Would you believe that that's literally happened? Probably people would say, would you feel comfortable challenging this concept in a group of friends in a pub? Would you feel comfortable defending this? Okay. There is a story, I cannot substantiate it, but I've got references for it. In NASA 1971, in Indiana, the space program were trying to put satellites. That was at the beginning when they were trying, in the 70s and 60s, when they were talking about satellites. It's important when you put a satellite in orbit that you put something that for the life of the satellite, it doesn't collide with anything. Yeah? It keeps orbiting, it's spinning in the orbit. So if you do something by mistake and it hits the moon, that's stupid, because you will have missed work costing hundreds of millions of pounds. So it's important for you to put it in an area that keeps spinning and the orbit doesn't hit anything. In order for them to do that, they have to look at the position of the sun and the moon and the various planets, and in order for them to do that, they look at the times and the years and how they planned out, and etc. So they were doing this through complex computer programs, and apparently the computer program came back saying there is an error. Time doesn't flow. There is something, it goes backwards and something happens, and the program stops. So they went into the IT department and they said there is something wrong with our computer program, and the guys came, they checked the program, and it's working. So they said, no, it's working. So they kept retrying the program again, and they put the data in it and see what happened, and still something wrong. Until someone said, you have got in the equation one missing day, and this is why it's the problem, and that missing day is actually written in the Bible. He said, come on. And they said, yeah, it's actually written in the Bible. And so they asked him to bring the Bible, and they brought the Bible, and they looked at it, and they come up with this verse in Joshua, this couple of verses. Joshua was fighting, and it was approaching a Sabbath. And by definition, on the Sabbath, as you know, the Jews have to stop. And he said, if we can prolong the day a little bit, we can finish these enemies off, because they were really tormenting the Israelites. So he prayed, And that is exactly what he said. Sun stands still over Gibeon, and moon stopped in the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped, till the people had revenge upon their enemies. That's the verse in Joshua. And just listen carefully to this. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. And we analyzed this, and it was near enough a whole day. It was 23 hours and 20 minutes. Near enough. Near enough. Yeah? Not bad. You can, 24 hours. But then they said, well, there is another story in the 2 Kings. Isaiah was the prophet, and there is Hezekiah. Hezekiah was dying. He was a king, one of the lovely kings in the Old Testament. And God sent him a message, say, hey, say goodbye to the guys, you're on your way out. And he really felt very bad. He felt he still had it in him to keep living and keep doing things. And he felt very sad. So he prayed to God to give him more life. And God accepted his prayer. And he sent him Isaiah to say, you'll live, you have got another few years left. And as a sign of this, Isaiah asked him, God tell him, I'll give you a sign. So see how gracious God is. He tells him, you will live, and he also tells him, I'll give you a sign to prove that I will give you life. It's so kind of God to do that. And then he gives him a choice for a sign. He said, shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees or go backward 10 degrees? You can't have a greater master than God. So kind. And then Hezekiah now in his deathbed starts thinking now, it's easy. It's an easy thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees. No, let the shadow go backward 10 degrees. Can you imagine someone talking to God like that? It's beautiful. Anyway, the Lord brought the shadow 10 degrees backward. And that is exactly 40 minutes. So, in Joshua, you have got about 1 day, which is 23 hours and 20 minutes, and the 40 minutes missing were in 2 Kings. That's typically exactly 24 hours. And that gives you an insight. When you read the Bible, don't read it just like that. In Joshua, it didn't say 1 day, it said about 1 day. So how accurate the Bible is. It's beautifully accurate. I put those question marks there because if you go and Google it tonight and you say the missing day, some people are disputing this story and some people said NASA never confirmed this and NASA never confirmed that. Fine. I'm just telling you a story. It's already quoted in books. I've got books quoting this and it's written. And in fact, people say this story is, and they quote that story and they say, oh, we have never had confirmation for it. But this is the story. To give you more evidence for that, in the Chinese history, during the reign of this emperor, Emperor Yao, if I pronounced it right, who lived at the same time as Joshua, there is a reported long day. That's in the Chinese history. It's documented in Chinese data. And Herodotus, a Greek historian, wrote that there is an account of a long day appearing in the records of the Egyptian priests. Someone else coming from different parts of the planet. Even more, some people write in the Mexican literature of an entire day occurred in a year that they call it the 7 rabbits. That year is called the 7 rabbits. And that year was exactly the same year that Joshua defeated the Philistines and conquered Palestine. It cannot be made up. The Chinese noted it. The Greeks noted it, the Egyptians noted it, the Mexicans noted it, and even in the Aztecs and Peruvians and Babylonians, they talk about a day of twice the natural length. And I've got different references here. That cannot be made up, even if my first story is too good to be true. There are evidence in the literature of other cultures. These guys were not trying to support Christianity. Yeah? So, the Bible is accurate, literally, not figuratively. When it says something, it happened. Because if you start to question it, did Jesus die? Or did he die symbolically? Once you start to open questions, there is nothing accurate. Now, I'll talk about Jesus. Jesus is the cornerstone of the Bible. I've got only 10 minutes, so... The odds of one person fulfilling a prophecy is whatever. Once you have 8 prophecies, it becomes 1 in 8, but you multiply it, it becomes 1 in 100,000 million.
100 million billion.
Can you imagine that? Because you see, Jesus is the cornerstone of the Bible, and we know that in the Old Testament you have lots of prophecies about him. How many prophecies do you think?
360.
More than 300. To fulfill only 8, you need 100 million to just fulfill all the 8. So that's more than winning the lottery. So Jesus was not joking when he fulfilled those prophecies. In fact, someone else who had more time on his hand and he knew more about maths than me, he said, in order for you to fulfill 48 prophecies, you need 157 zeros to fulfill that. And Jesus fulfilled more than 300. I don't know how many zeros would you need for that. And to me, for those of you who are interested in figures, they say the estimated number of electrons in the whole universe is 10 to the power of 79. In order for you to fulfill only 48 prophecies of Jesus, you need much, much more than that. Jesus wasn't joking when he fulfilled those prophecies. Can you see, the Bible isn't a joke. Now, I've got this table here, which I know you can't read, but that's intentional. Can you see, for example, we talk about the Messiah would be sold for 30 pieces of silver. That was prophesied in the Old Testament. The Messiah would be betrayed by a friend. Even the way Jesus was killed on a cross was written in the Psalms thousands of years before the Romans came and invented crucifixion. How could the psalmist imagine that Jesus would be crucified and raised on the cross before they even created crucifixion? In the psalmist days, they didn't know of crucifixion. That cannot be a coincidence. In fact, I was amazed to see that even when Judas, when Judas felt guilty and felt sorry that he betrayed Jesus, what did he do? He went back, before he killed himself, what did he do? He went back to the priest and he said, "Hey guys, I'm sorry, I've delivered innocent blood." And he said, "What's in it for us? You have done the deal, that's your problem." What does he do? What did he do? He didn't give back, he didn't accept it from him. He tossed the money in the house of the Lord and then went and killed himself. Even that bit of throwing the money is prophesied in the Old Testament. That cannot be a joke. That cannot be coincidence. And I have got the references here. So, the Bible is so powerful. This is one of the prophecies about Jesus. It's in Daniel. You've all heard of it. I'm sure you've heard of it. From the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So from the proclamation to restore Jerusalem to the Messiah is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. I'm not going to go into the detail of why do they split them like that, but simplistically they are talking about 69 weeks. 69 weeks meaning 69 times 7 times, each day is a year, effectively. Yeah? So 69 times 7 times 360. And why 360? Because the Jewish year was 360 days only. Exactly 173,880 days. Fast forward those days, exactly will take you to 6 April 32 AD, which is exactly the day Jesus, as historians confirm, walked into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. Exactly. That's not a joke. That's not coincidence. Exactly. By the day. See, all this is science. All this is theories. The world is coming with science, and we try to answer and understand the science and the postulations. But does this take you to heaven? At the end of the day, it's up to you. We get so busy by knowledge, and we like to become, we say, even the world say, knowledge is power. But that doesn't take you to heaven. And I would like to finish by these guys. We all heard about them. We all felt something somehow about them. Some of us heard the story and wanted to wash it out of our hands, or of our heads. Some people cried about them. They are the most recent saints we have in our church, like these guys. You've got here Abu Sifin, Mari Gerges, Marimina. They are saints, but these guys are like them. Now, I had another picture that I intentionally took out because you couldn't have tolerated it. This was the picture of them 5 minutes before they died. Do you know how did they die? How? I know, that's seemingly a silly question. How? Do you know
behind the neck.
how? From the front of the back? Back. Front. Front. Here. Fine. Can I have a volunteer, please?
You're too far. يا حنا عشان الشعب يعني يماني مش قوي قوي يسجل الموضوع عشان انا مو معاهم
If I
استنى اسهل له الموضوع.
Of course I'm not going to do that for the girls today. If those guys, there is a picture, those guys had their hands tied to the side. If someone tries to tickle you, what would you do? I've done this to Hanna a minute ago. What did you do, Hanna? Where is Hanna? She's hiding. She didn't. What did you do when I just did that? You just reflexly did that. Imagine someone trying to do that to you. What would you do? Exactly. How would you prevent them from doing that? How would you prevent them from doing that? Hold their head. Hold their head. That. Can you imagine? You didn't even tolerate that. They were on the floor. Sorry, thank you. They were on the floor. They were on the floor with their hands tied. These guys, you have seen how powerful they are. They chose the most strongest guys in ISIS. Literally leaping on top of them. Literally sitting on top of them with their fingers. They put them to poke their eyes. So if you try to do that, the finger will go into your eyes. And that went in until they did it. I'm not saying this for us to look into the gruesome fact. But these guys, in the last few minutes of their lives, they had their enemies sitting on top of them, people who were so cruel to them that they did not value their life. Like, I hope none of us would have someone that nasty to us that would devalue us to that extent. But that effectively is what was prophesied and mentioned in the Psalms beforehand when David was saying, you allowed people to get on top of us. It's gruesome. Imagine you dying on the floor, that helpless, lying flat, with your hands tied behind you, unable to do anything. Even you can't move your head, because if you move your head to prevent yourself and protect yourself, it pokes your eyes, and you get blind. You can't. So you just end up just freezing like that. And what did these guys do in the last minute? They just shouted the name of Jesus. They shouted the name of Jesus. And that was not what we think they said. The guys themselves said that in the television advert when they talked about how powerful their ISIS is. They said, that is exactly what they said about those guys. They supplicate whom they worship and die upon their paganism. Because of course, to them were pagans. So they admitted that these guys, under these circumstances where they are helpless, they are poor, they are dying, they were just shouting the name of Jesus. These guys never met Darwin. These guys don't understand about the chemical affinity theory, but does it matter? Guys don't enjoy reading and going into things about philosophy and getting busy responding to others, getting busy trying to prove others right or wrong. It's not about that. It's about eventually will we make it like those who not. These guys lived life just focusing on Jesus. Jesus the friend, Jesus the Savior. It's not about theories. They didn't know how to talk a couple of words that I've mentioned now. But would I stand the test that they have stood? I don't think I would. So at the end of the day, it's good for us to have some knowledge, to know that our Bible is solid, our Christianity is solid. But it's not about knowledge. When you are interested in reading, when you are interested in your life, it's about this, and it's about Jesus. Thank you. Sorry, I thought it's over. Yeah, and I'm not sure if you have enough time, but if you want to.
No, we have time.
You have time. Oh. Does it make sense? I'm sorry, it was boring. That's the subject. That's the subject.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Maggie.
What I wanted to say, you abused me as always, being the case for 20 years. And of course, your closure was a fantastic one. I would have to say that when they were chopping their heads or whatever, saying it, I believe that they were seeing something very, very, very joyful for them, rather than what we think has happened. Because the pictures we are talking about is for ordinary, situation. But for these guys to be a believer and to look, like the saints, all what we understand that they were looking up because they are seeing heaven. And maybe they are under the influence of whatever knows, adrenaline, noradrenaline, better than me in this. So they might not be in that pain.
Yeah.
We were, trying to say.
Absolutely. We don't know what will happen when we go through this, but we know that it wasn't just a matter of seconds when they had to go through this. Imagine someone going here, coming with a machine gun and gunning us without having a chance to escape. We'll die, we'll be called saints, and they will cut us into small pieces, put us in churches and stuff. But we will have no chance. We will have no time to reflect on it properly. These guys, and that's a serious point, these guys had time. These guys had time to say yes or no. These guys were poor. They left their country. They left their families to earn a bit of living in dangerous Libya. And despite this, when ISIS called Christians, some of the guys there said no and defaulted to Islam and rejected Christianity. But the only black guy, you have seen a black guy somewhere. This guy apparently comes from Nigeria or Chad or wherever. And many of his pals said, no, we'll have our life and run. He said, no, I stick with these guys. So they had it thought about for days. Can you imagine? You have a chance in you. You can make the choice to live or die. It's not you're committed to it. Even to the last minute, they could have escaped. So I'm sure God will have, as you say, would have given some ability to keep going through it. There was a story of this newlywed chap. His wife mentioned it, because lots of people now, as you have heard Abuna in church, lots of people now go and visit this village to see what was about these guys to make them that powerful. And they met with one of the widow of one of those guys. Can you imagine what she said? That's what she said. She said every night before we went to bed, on our bed, I would just do this on his forehead, and he would do the same on my forehead. And it crossed my mind. I've been married for 20 years. I've never thought of doing this to my wife, less than this to my daughter. And she's never done this to me. Has any one of you thought of that? But can you see?
I will do it, inshallah.
Now, she said when the news came and she knew that he died, on the first night she slept on their bed. She said, I cried because he's not there, but then on his pillow, I just did the cross. And then she said, I turned around and I started crying because I'm sleeping in this bed on my own now. And then she said, I turned around and I suddenly saw him, and his whole face was with red crosses in blood. And he smiled at me and he did this to me, and then he disappeared. You believe in that, you don't believe in that, that's 180 degrees opposite to what I was saying beforehand. Can I prove it? No, I can't. But do I care to prove it? I don't. You either believe it or not. It's something here. And you have to love Jesus at that level. You have to realize, and I do hope that I can do that. I hope that I have this relationship with Jesus, not by knowledge, not by 10 to the power of 60 odd. It's by here, by having Jesus to become my friend, my savior, that whenever I'm going through a difficult time, I say, hey, you are with me. Jesus was called Emmanuel. Emmanuel meaning what? God is with us. God is with us. So it's not about this, it's about that. And if we have Jesus here, everything will be all right.
Sorry, going back to the early point about evolution and things like that, why is it always either we have like creationists or evolutionists, but why doesn't it reconcile together somehow? When which that God may have used evolution not in its full elements as portrayed by Darwin, but to kind of like get life to the form it is now.
Yeah, which we talk about and we accept. I mean, for example, they talk about Australia and the way Australia was formed. And Australia was part of Asia and so on hundreds of millions of years ago.
As well,
and then it separated, and then it became this. And they say that the animals in Australia are different than the animals anywhere else simply because of that. They became isolated in a microcosm of their own, and they started evolving in their own. That's fine. But the problem is that people argue that if you have a theory for creation, you do not need a creator. And that is the problem. And I believe, for example, that if they say God did this, then God did that. If you look at the days got complex as they evolved. And so God had an order in mind. How long did it take him? I don't know. Hundreds of millions of years. The Bible called it a day. That doesn't mean that it literally was a day. So sometimes the day doesn't mean a day. But you're absolutely right. But the problem is that people want to create or want to develop something that is autopilot, that doesn't require God.
Yeah.
Last question. Regarding the point of Nixon, do they really announce anything?
No, this story that I mentioned to you was quoted in a very respected book about the Bible, and they mention in that book where it did appear. It appeared in a Christian magazine, and they mentioned the name of the IT consultant who was involved in that and so on. And he was contacted subsequently, and apparently he said he was going to send references for it and so on. NASA didn't get involved in that. And this is why I said, however it's made up, however it's true, I have got other evidence from other cultures to back that up.
Because basically some Muslims came to me and they told me like NASA said that they are going back to Quran in order to prove a lot of things. And just my answer to them, I don't know anything, what's your reference?
But this is the point I'm making. I personally have never been interested in comparative theology. That's I have to put my hands up. I don't care what the Catholics and Protestants do. Personally, that's a personal view. And Muslims sometimes go into these discussions. To me, that doesn't matter. And they used to say, even look at Jesus himself. Did Jesus win everyone in his day? No. So no one will win an argument about Jesus by arguing. You can argue, you can show people miracles, even miracles. People saw miracles before their eyes, and they believed them or didn't believe them. And however you believe in that or not, if God opens your eyes, you accept him. If your eyes are not open, even if people wake up from the dead before your eyes, you don't believe it. Lazarus, it's documented miracle in the Bible, and did the Jews believe in it? They wanted to kill Jesus because he brought Lazarus from the dead. So arguing won't work. I've argued with a couple of Muslim colleagues and friends beforehand, or they argued with me. You don't win arguments like that. And this is why I never do that. I never get interested in it. It's either here or not. That doesn't never get it.
Okay.
Is that it? Any more questions?